Baseball isn't just numbers, numbers, numbers.
This game is not being played on computers.
You don't do that with a bunch of statistical gimmicks.
You don't put a team together with a computer.
We're talking weighted runs created plus,
expected WOBA,
his sweet spot rate,
defensive runs above average,
average exit velocity,
barrel rate,
xFIP,
BABIP,
SIERA.
We are
Above Replacement Radio.
And welcome to Above Replacement Radio, where we're talking baseball kind of whenever. I'm your host, Chris Gianta. Over there on the other side of the screen is Daniel Curran. How you doing, Daniel?
Chris, I'm doing very well today. It is our first, true off-season show, if you will. We don't have any previous baseball to cover today. Obviously, it's been a while since we recorded, and certainly, as I'm sure everyone is aware, there's a lot that's obviously happened in the world since the last time we spoke on these airwaves. Obviously, the president of baseball operations for the San Francisco Giants, Buster Posey, they decided on their new GM. It's going to be Zach Manassian, the brother of Angels GM Perry Manassian. So that's obviously a huge deal. Everyone's been talking about that. Additionally, there was the election for the Classic Baseball Era Committee. The ballot was released last week. There's some interesting names on it. Dick Allen is one of them. Vic Harris, everyone's talking about vote Harris, right? I mean, that's obviously such a huge thing. Those are kind of just the major things that, of course, have happened since the last time we spoke about baseball.
Yeah. There's certain people out there saying, this is going to be the last classic baseball election. And
Steve Garvey's on the ballot. That's a huge deal.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's probably the biggest scale ballot that he's going to be on all fall, all winter, just throughout this year. So lots of big things going on. I understand why people might be distracted and maybe not be fully tuned into the show because of all these big things going on. So well done, Daniel. I really appreciate you providing context in such a controversial time in our country, in our baseball world. Some are
saying it's the biggest classic era baseball election of our lifetimes.
Yeah. And people rag on and be like, that's what you said last, classic baseball election. But,
but look, Dick Allen, it's Dick Allen's first election post posthumously. We need to get him in.
Yeah.
If we don't, we're going through a very dark path if that doesn't happen.
Yeah, exactly. I heard the Washington Post refused to endorse Dick Allen. So it's there's a lot of people who are upset about that.
Yeah, and I heard that too.
Yeah. But shout out to baseball. Shout out to everything going on in early November in our world. Some ballots that we've been interested in have been the BBWAA ballots
next week.
Next week. I didn't.
It drops next week.
Yeah, the finalists drop this upcoming week, and then the awards get announced. I was confused by that because I feel like throughout time it has always been this upcoming week. It's always been.
Has it? It feels right, yeah.
Second week of November. I feel like it's always been that. I feel like we always.
Well, the World Series also ran a bit later than it usually does this year, right? It was Game 5. It ended on October 30th.
Yeah, so the season was supposed
7
to
would have
end,
been November 2nd.
Yeah, season was supposed to end November 2nd as you mentioned. So maybe a little bit later than usual, but I feel like
when I said drops next week, I meant the baseball era, the BBWA Hall of Fame ballot.
Oh,
that's always where my mind is. Yeah, no, that comes out next week. But yes, the finalists for the BBWAA awards do come out tomorrow.
Right.
The All MLB team, I believe, is announced this week as well.
The results of that?
I think so.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah, we've never done our own all MLB teams.
I thought we did once.
We did it way back, maybe
in 2020.
Yeah, I think it was while we were in the Springfield College radio station. But we haven't done it in a while, and I don't know why. It's just there's just so much to talk about award wise anyway, and
No
Um,
one also like I don't know, like no one remembers all MLB. Like it doesn't go on your baseball reference page. Like it's
yeah.
basically the same thing as, Gold Glove, Silver Slugger, whatever. There's just one per position. It's not like a league wide thing.
Yeah, and I kind of gave up on it when
And it's like anyone who wins the all MLB thing, like they're getting other recognition that's more known, whether that be Gold Glove, Silver Slugger, BBWA awards, whatever it may be.
yeah, exactly. I kind of gave up on it when Jose Ramirez wasn't first or second team in 2021 despite having a better year than both Austin Riley and Rafael Devers, and
Yeah,
because it is very it's like
it's
I
a
think
fan vote, right?
it's half fan vote and
And
half
then
like quote
players.
unquote expert vote, like
Okay,
writers or something like that. I'm
yeah,
not
really, it should just be us two and us two only, is what we're saying.
ultimately when we get down to brass tacks, I think that's kind of the
Yeah.
sentiment we always go for.
Hmm.
It's like a two-person dictatorship is what we want
Yeah.
the league to be. But yeah, so we're going to talk about those awards today. The you know uh Rookie of the Year, Manager of the Year, Cy Young, MVP. But we also, yeah, we have some reflection on the past year of players to watch, our annual hits and flops list, as well
Mhm.
as our annual custom awards, which are, now some of them are in their fourth rendition, which is pretty crazy to think about. But yeah, I mean, what did we want to get into first?
Let's go through the hits and flops, right? I mean, it's one of our favorites. We get to reflect on what we were kind of right on, what we were kind of wrong on, how right we were, how wrong we were. Uh, and I'm actually pretty proud of myself this year. I had some good ones.
Yeah, yeah. On my end, like it was kind of weird to evaluate because my hits weren't, not this is the verbiage is going to be confusing here, but the hits weren't the hittiest, but the flops weren't the floppiest. So
Hmm.
I was very flat in my
Yeah,
evaluation. Whereas I think last year I had some mega bombs and some mega, whatever the opposite of that is, some
yeah.
really good ones too. But
So
yeah, it was
of
kind of a
course,
flat line for me.
in every preseason in March, Chris and I go through each of the 30 MLB teams. We pick usually one to two players on each team, typically a lower profile type of guy that we are really excited to watch this year for whatever reasons. It's usually, like we said, someone more under the radar where you're never going to hear us being like, so for the Dodgers, I'm talking about Shohei Ohtani, right? It's never something like that. So we like to go through them every year, talk about who the best picks were, who the worst picks were, because I mean, I think it's worth exposing ourselves as well as patting ourselves on the back because I mean, when you go lower profile like we do, you're asking yourself to have a lot of misses. But you know what? The hits were pretty good too. So we are going through all of that today. I have five on each list. Is that what you're doing as well?
I have four hits, five flops.
Okay.
So yeah, we start off with the hits with that we end with the flops because the
It's
flops are
funny to laugh
always
at ourselves.
it's usually fun. Like sometimes you get some really just good ones. Like I think yeah, maybe 2 or 3 years ago I had a guy that not only never made it to MLB but really just sucked in AAA, like had a sub 600 OPS in AAA. Just really completely bombed in the guy. So sometimes you just have that and it's just you got to laugh at it. So since you have more hits, I will allow you to lead off.
All right. So for my number five hits, this is ranked from the best hit is last. So this is my fifth best hit of the season, one that I'm happy about. This guy is a staple on ARR. We love talking about him. We've been talking about him for several years, and I'm happy to report that he really showed up in a big way this year, and that is Aaron Bummer from the Atlanta Braves, formerly of the Chicago White Sox. I was very optimistic about the change of scenery for him, getting out of Chicago, where the defense is usually not that good. Hopefully, seeing more out of him in Atlanta. And it was a very different kind of year for him. Not exactly what I expected, but still objectively a very strong year to the point where he's making this list. He had a career low 2.23 FIP in 55 and a third innings pitched this year. That ranked seventh among all qualifying relievers. So a top seven FIP, pretty good for Aaron Bummer there for a guy that usually has a lot of walk issues. For the first time in his career, his sinker was not his most commonly used pitch. He's obviously a premier ground ball pitcher, which means he's a sinker baller. But this year, he went with the sweeper as his top choice. And that sweeper had a 43.9% whiff rate, the sixth highest among the pitchers with at least 250 sweepers thrown. So, very strong showing out of the top pick out of the Aaron Bummer arsenal this year. The sweeper had an average launch angle of 6 degrees, staying in line with him as a ground ball pitcher, and that was the fourth lowest among the 99 pitchers with at least 25 batted balls on sweepers. So obviously a very good showing there. His hard hit rate had the fourth steepest drop off among all qualifiers. It went from 44.6% in 2023 to 32.9% in 2024. That's an 11.7% drop. And before this year, his career average exit velocity on fly balls was 91.7 miles an hour. And in 2024, it went down to 84.4 miles per hour. So that went down about 7 miles an hour. Obviously, Aaron Bummer's not giving up a lot of fly balls, but when he did, it was even less this year. And that's why he only gave up 2 home runs in 55 and a third innings pitched. That explains the 2.23 FIP. It was also a nice decrease in walk rate for him this year. His overall average exit velocity fell this year. It was a very solid year out of the bullpen. So Aaron Bummer is on my hit list for 2024.
Yeah. He's someone we root for just based on his pitching style. Big ground ball guy, as you mentioned. And yeah, by the way, to serve a little bit of context, we kind of rate these hits and flops based on expectations compared to performance. So if we did have a higher profile guy, that amplifies their expectations a lot. So maybe they'll be lower on a list despite performing better than some of the players. But in terms of rating our hits and our flops, it's a lot compared to expectations or compared to the baseline that they set either the year before or the 2 years before. So yeah, my number 4 hit that I put down was Michael King. He was probably one of the higher profile guys I put as a player to watch. And his rate statistics actually got worse. It's just the fact that he did it over a longer sample size. And, coming into this year, we had never seen Michael King have a full year as a starter. In fact, he really only had, a half season of being a starter. He had been a reliever with the Yankees, and they transitioned him into being a starter. And luckily for them, upped his trade value and helped them get Juan Soto. Michael King goes out, not only has a full year as a starter, but qualifies for the ERA title, throws over 170 innings, and has a 2.95 ERA and 3.13 FIP, I believe, or what was it? 3.33 FIP. And his out of 58 qualifying pitchers, Michael King's ERA ranked 9th, expected ERA ranked 15th, and FIP ranked 15th. And he also ranked 13th in F WAR and 14th in B WAR. So this was someone who had never had a full year as a starter, but turned out to be a top 15 starter in baseball, pretty much by consensus. And yeah, if his expectations were a little bit lower, I'm sure he would have been a lot higher on this list. But because he was already kind of a name and had already had a decent amount of success beforehand, he's a little bit lower on this list, but he should be acknowledged because he did have a really good year and somehow made the Juan Soto deal not look like a complete disaster, because Juan Soto set a really high bar, had maybe the best year of his career, but Michael King still made it look somewhat salvageable for the Padres. So that's my number 4 hit. Who is your number 4 hit?
My number 4 hit is, I took a lot of guys that had kind of the archetype of big power, not a lot of contact, a lot of strikeouts. But man, when they run into one, I described this guy as Joey Gallo at home. And man, did that really show for Matt Wallner of the Minnesota Twins. He was my number 4 hit this year. Not a ton of playing time, but when he did get playing time, he slashed 259, 372, 523 for an 895 OPS in 261 plate appearances. He finished the year with a 17.5% barrel rate, barrels per batted ball. And that was the 6th highest among the hitters, the 404 hitters with at least 100 batted balls. I believe the only people he trailed on that list were like Ohtani, Judge, either Soto or Sen, and then Kerry Carpenter. So that was a very impressive list for him to be on. 22.2% of Matt Wallner's total batted balls were hard hit and in the sweet spot. That ups the major league average of 17.8%. 38.9% of his batted balls were also blasts, which means they were fast swings and they were squared up. So basically, what that means is he swung the bat fast enough to generate what is known as a fast swing, 75 miles per hour. And he also hit uh, at 80% of its total maximum potential exit velocity based on bat speed and pitch velocity. He did 38.9% of the time on batted balls, the ninth highest rate on the same list of 404 hitters that I mentioned earlier. He had a 49.2% pull rate and a 34.1% fly ball rate. He also pulled around 34% of his fly balls. And when he hit the fly balls, they had an average exit velocity of 98.4 miles per hour, tied for the fourth highest among the 412 hitters with at least 25 fly balls. So it was an awesome year for Matt Wallner. I said he was Joey Gallo at home, but really Joey Gallo might be Matt Wallner at home right now.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, very similar archetype, but yeah, Wallner actually had a lot of success with it this year. My number three hit is a guy we both had as a player to watch. I'm not sure if you have him on your list, but he is certainly a hit. It's just why he might be lower on the list is because he was a little bit more of a clear choice, especially just a victim of lack of options.
He's also my number three.
So yeah, so we're on the same page here. It's Mason
Yes.
Miller of the
Yep.
Formerly Oakland Athletics, and yeah, he had an excellent season. I mean, if he was more under the radar, he certainly would have been a number one for both of us. But just because I think some people were kind of already on his radar beforehand, he's a little bit lower on this list. But to break down what he did, out of 169 qualifying relievers, Mason Miller had the fifth lowest FIP, lowest expected ERA, and the highest strikeout rate. It's really all you really need to know. I mean, he struck out 42% of the batters he faced in about 65 innings pitched. A strong nominee for Rookie of the Year, and yeah, just absolutely phenomenal. And yeah, like the only reason we could have gone maybe a little bit more deeper and called someone a little bit more niche, like potentially like Lawrence Butler or JJ Bleday. That would have been like the best call, I guess, on the Athletics. But yeah, I mean, Mason Miller was a great choice. He definitely outperformed our expectations. We didn't expect him to have the lowest expected ERA among qualifying relievers. And yeah, that's why he's going to be on our list here.
Yep, he's also my number three. I don't have much to add, so I'll just kind of go through some of the numbers. He had a 2.3 FWAR, which ranked third among all relievers. He had the highest strikeout rate among all relievers at 41.8% and the highest K rate minus walk rate at 33.3%. Ground balls against Mason Miller had an 81.7 mile per hour average exit velocity, tied for the ninth lowest among the 391 pitchers with at least 50 ground balls given up this year. So, a lot of soft contact with the high end velocity. Whiff rate on his slider at 47.2%. The fastball obviously got a lot of the attention, but the slider, that secondary pitch, complemented it very nicely. That whiff rate on his slider at 47.2%, tied for the seventh highest among the 122 pitchers with at least 300 sliders thrown. Yeah, there's not much else to say about Mason Miller. He's, an obvious hit for both of us. He was outstanding this year, one of the best relievers in the game. And yeah, obviously probably would be number one if he was on a different team or if he maybe had less expectations coming into this year. But I think three is a very appropriate list or place for both of us to put him.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. My number two hit comes from Baltimore, which actually makes me feel a little bit better because Baltimore
Yeah.
kind of underperformed what I expected. So having a player overperform, who I selected as a player to watch is a pleasant surprise. And I picked Jordan Westburg at the start of the year. There was a lot of young players to be excited about with the Orioles coming into this year, whether it be obviously Adley Rutschman and Gunnar Henderson, but also, the potential of Jackson Holiday, Grayson Rodriguez, um, you know, uh,
Heston
Heston
Kjerstad, Colton
Kjerstad.
Cowser.
Yeah, Heston Kjerstad, Colton Cowser. And yes, a lot of them did really well this year. But Jordan Westbrook also did really well this year, and he increased his OPS plus from 100 to 129, a 29-point difference in OPS plus, and he also did that in 219 more plate appearances. So it wasn't just, he got more playing time, and he had better better rate stats in more playing time. And overall, in terms of value at the plate, he ranked third on the Orioles in batting runs behind Gunnar Henderson and Anthony Santander, basically meaning he was the third most valuable hitter in the Orioles lineup behind, two of the better hitters in baseball this year, Gunnar Henderson and Anthony Santander. So yeah, that's my number two pick, because yeah, he was by definition an average hitter before this year. But this year, kind of put himself on the map and secured himself as, part of the future with Baltimore. Who do you have as your number two hit?
Yeah, at number two, I'm going back to the NL East. Talking about Mark Vientos of the New York Mets, a very strong pick, one that I'm very proud of this year. 266, 322, 516 for an 838 OPS and 454 plate appearances. Didn't quite qualify, but was pretty close to that qualifying mark. 82nd percentile average exit velocity at 91.2 miles per hour, and that's a lot of why I picked him. Yeah, I knew he was capable of hitting the ball hard. 85th percentile expected slugging at 475. 92nd percentile barrel rates at 14.1%, and 80th percentile hard hit rate at 46.6%. 133 weighted runs created plus for Mark Vientos. That put him third among the 29 third basemen with at least 400 plate appearances. He only trailed Jose Ramirez and Rafael Devers. And one thing that I talked about with Vientos is that, he has a lot of things to work on, but one big thing can be fixing the batted ball distribution. And he absolutely did that while keeping his exit velocity. His ground ball rate went from 53.7% to 44.2%. His line drive rate went from 16.8% to 24.4%, nearly an 8% increase on line drive rate. And also his average exit velocity on fly balls and line drives was 96 miles an hour. In 2023, 36.8% of the hard hit balls by Mark Vientos were in the sweet spot. And in 2024, that number rose to 47%, just over 10% in terms of hitting the ball hard and having it be where you want, because you can hit a lot of hard ground balls, but it's still not going to result in very much. He went on to slash 327, 362, 636 for a 998 OPS in 58 postseason appearances as well. He got the Mets 2 Game 6 of the NLCS, along with a couple others, but he was a major part of it. So Mark Vientos, a very nice step forward for him this year, and very likely going into next year as the everyday third baseman for the Mets.
Yeah, absolutely. He was, the Mets core, like there's a lot of guys who maybe haven't met expectations in the young Mets core, but Mark Vientos established himself as someone to be really excited about over in Queens. And yeah, before I reveal my number one hit, I got to throw out an honorable mention. Shout out to a guy who had a 2067 OPS, who I put as a player to watch.
Stone Garrett.
Stone Garrett. He had 6 plate appearances, but in those,
I put him on my Immaculate Grid recently for Nationals 300 average season because he hit 600 this year.
Yeah, he went 3 for 5 with a double and a home run to slash 600 slash 600, 667, 1400 for a 2067 OPS. And I put him as a player to watch. However, I did not forecast him playing in only 2 games this year. So honorable mention. He will not be on the list, but honorable mention. My number one hit was Jock Peterson of the Arizona Diamondbacks. First year with the Diamondbacks this year. I pointed out some lack of luck that he had with San Francisco in 2023 in the, barreled, had high barrel rates, high average exit velocity, but the numbers did not match. His actual numbers did not match his expected numbers, and he kind of had that recorrection this year. He put up a 908 OPS for the Diamondbacks this year. Was excellent. One of the better hitters in baseball all year. His OPS plus overall just increased by 39 points. And out of 207 hitters with 400 plus plate appearances this year, his on base percentage ranked fourth and his OPS ranked 10th. So out of those hitters with 400 plus plate appearances, was a pretty much a top 10 hitter, or at least around a top 10 hitter in baseball after being slightly above average the year before, at least in terms of on the surface numbers. So Jock Peterson is Chris Gianta's number one hit of 2024.
My number one hit is my third NL East pick on this list. I nailed a lot of my NL East picks, but none better than Christopher Sanchez of the Philadelphia Phillies. This was a slam dunk pick for me, one that I'm very happy about, one that I feel very vindicated about rather, because I've been beating the drum of Christopher Sanchez for some time now, and we really got to see it in quite an impressive way this year. A 3.32 ERA and a flat 3 FIP in 181 and 2/3 innings pitched. A truly a full season of very good work. A 4.7 FWAR, which ranked him tied for sixth among all pitchers. A 5.4% barrel rate on 557 batted balls, tied for the 27th lowest among the 212 seasons with at least 500 batted balls going back to 2018. So, I mean, you got to go back pretty far to understand the barrel rate against Christopher Sanchez and the workload to appreciate how good it was. His changeup, which is his secondary pitch, had the highest run value of any changeup in Major League Baseball this season, and the ninth highest for any changeup in a season since 2015. He had a 58.3% ground ball rate as well, which was the 12th highest among the 398 seasons since 2015 with at least 500 batted balls. He was also an all-star this year. And it was an awesome season. I'm very happy to see Christopher Sanchez have blossomed the way that he did this year. I would also say this is probably the best pick you could have made on the Philadelphia Phillies, considering, low profile, big performance. I don't really know who would have been a better pick than Christopher Sanchez on this team this year.
Yeah, I don't think anyone sticks out. I think a lot of the question marks with the Phillies this year was the rotation beyond Nola and Wheeler. And Christopher Sanchez was a big part of the reason why people were so confident in that rotation heading into the playoffs, because he really emerged as a top arm and probably, above Nola at this point in that Phillies rotation. Quality number one pick there. You were early on him. You had a how about that on him exclusively
in 2023.
Late 2023, exclusively based on
His
pitch movement.
Yep.
It turned out well for 2024. Now on to the flops of the players to watch that we had. We both have 5, is that correct?
Yes.
All right, so I will since you ended on the hits, I will open the flops. And with my number 5, it's maybe a little bit of a weaker one, but it's kind of a requirement to put him as a flop because of just his overall fate this year. Talking about Victor Gonzalez of the New York Yankees. I was very confident.
One of your favorites.
This was my second time ever putting Victor Gonzalez as a player to watch. I put him, I think, in 2021 for the Dodgers as a player to watch. And I think he just ended up being injured. This year, he threw 23 1/3 innings pitched for the Yankees. His ERA wasn't bad. I think he had an above average ERA plus. It's just he had a 5.95 FIP, so he certainly was getting lucky by having average results. I think largely because of those underlying numbers, he ended up being released before the end of the regular season. If you get released, you're automatically on this list, no matter what. You could get MVP votes, but if you get released in the middle of the season, you're probably going to be a flop. Who is your number 5 flop?
My number five flop. Everyone was very surprised to see this guy's performance this year. I'm talking about Hunter Goodman from the Colorado Rockies. A lot of the reason why I picked him was because he had a very interesting ZiPS projection on Fangraphs, and I looked into him. He had some high barrel rates. I liked the idea of him in Colorado, and it just didn't work out this year. 224 plate appearances where he slashed 190, 228, 417 for a 645 OPS. He had a 40% chase rate, a 15.8% squared up rate. I really don't have a ton to say on any of my flops, especially because a lot of them, there weren't exactly a ton of expectations for anyway. But yeah, obviously it didn't work out this year for Hunter Goodman, and he is my number five flop.
Um, yeah, yeah, he's number five. Yeah, it's Rockies were a tough one to
Mhm.
find.
Yeah.
It
I mean,
was
like there were, you could have said Brenton Doyle, you could have said Michael Tolia, and those would have looked good.
yeah, you're right.
It's not like options weren't available in hindsight.
Yeah, yeah. In hindsight, there were a couple good ones, but hard to identify. Um, my number four flop is DJ Stewart of the New York Mets, and it's extra points when the team overperforms, but your guy
Yep.
underperforms.
Yep.
So the Mets had, probably somewhere between 5 and 10 more wins than I expected them to have this year, but that was not because of DJ Stewart. DJ Stewart's OPS plus dropped 48 points this year, and his slugging dropped 209 points, and he ended up being below replacement. The slugging dropping 209 points is especially alarming because I was talking all about how he was pulling fly balls, pulling barrels, and how well he was doing that last year. But it was a small sample size for a reason, and it ended up not being very sustainable, and he did not end up being a large part of the Mets' success this year. So DJ Stewart getting my number four flop.
So for my number four flop of the year, I was asking for this one. I mean, I served this one up on a silver platter to be put on this list. And I was well aware that it was a risk I was taking, and I ended up paying the price for it. It was a high risk, high reward type of thing, putting Jorge Barrosa from the Arizona Diamondbacks on my players to watch list. He reminded me a lot of Stephen Kwan last year when I saw him coming up through the minors in 2023. I was hoping he could maybe play some kind of role for the Diamondbacks this year, and he did appear in a couple of games very early in the season, in like the first 2 weeks. Didn't do a ton there, didn't come back up, didn't do a ton in the minor leagues either, but he appeared in 8 games this year for the Diamondbacks. He went 3 for 17, slash 176, 176, 222, ended up with a 22 weighted runs created plus. Additionally, ended up with a 98 weighted runs created plus in 329 AAA plate appearances. So not only did he have a very forgettable stint in the major leagues for a couple weeks, but he also was a below average hitter in the minor leagues. So Jorge Barrosa, a bit underwhelming on all levels this year for me.
Right, right. And I believe when you reference Stephen Kwan, you're talking about 2022.
Yes,
Um,
when he was my number one, and when he was probably the best hit I've ever had in all the years we've been doing this.
yeah, that's tough to beat because it was a non-top
Yeah.
30 prospect in the organization, and he finished as a Rookie of the Year finalist in a
hmm
stacked race, by the
Would have
way.
been better if Foolish Bailey didn't also put him on people's
Right.
radars, but he did. So I put him on my list before he publicly put his out, but his public Stephen Kwan recognition happened before mine.
I feel like we do that once a year with Foolish Bailey stuff. Like we'll always have one
Yeah.
player to watch that he also has, but you know, it's I don't think we're quite on his radar, but he has been on the show. So shout out to Foolish Bailey. But my number three flop, this one just a guy, it was a hard team to choose because there were too many high profile guys, but yeah, just a real zero of a pick here. JP Fireeisen of the Los Angeles Dodgers. He had not pitched in 2023 due to a surgery, but he was coming back, and I was optimistic about what he had done previously in his career. However, yeah, he did not produce really at all. He was, I think, below replacement for the Dodgers. Ended up only throwing 11 innings and put up an .818 ERA alongside a 6.71 FIP. So yeah, that's what old JP Fireisen did. And he's yeah, that's going to be a flop from a team that ended up being the best team in baseball this year. Who is your number 3 pick?
My number 3 flop. This guy was already kind of down, and he went even further down. I'm talking about Eloy Jimenez, formerly of the Chicago White Sox, eventually of the Baltimore Orioles. Part of my evaluation of Eloy Jimenez was, well, he was not very good last year, but how bad could it get? It can't be worse than that, right? 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 Well, it turns out it could be. He slashed 238, 239, 336 for a 625 OPS in 349 plate appearances. A lot of why I evaluated him was saying, hey, what if he lifts the ball just like a little bit more? He still has that power. If he could just lift the ball a little bit more. Well, his ground ball rate went up by 3.5%, and his fly ball rate went down 4%. It went down to 15.7%, his fly ball rate, which is about 9 points lower than the league average. And to make things even worse, 15.7% fly ball rate is not very good, but only 10% of his fly balls were pulled. And that is tied for the 6th lowest among the aforementioned 412 hitters with at least 25 fly balls. So, yeah, it was a rough go at it for Eloy Jimenez. And, yeah, he was my number 3 flop.
Yeah, it's tough when you take a high profile guy out of hopes that he can surprise some people this year, and then just yeah, unfortunate.
I was trying to like buy low on him, and his stock went down.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
It was a tough one.
Yeah, it was like getting blockbuster stock in like 2009 or whatever. Um, but
Yeah.
but yeah, no, yeah, as we know that White Sox roster was a bit barren, and it might have been tough to select someone who would succeed, and I don't really know if
I
there were
mean,
any picks.
Garrett Crochet is like one of the best picks you could have made on any team going into this year. Now that we're in hindsight,
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, he would
I
have been
was
like
I was think I always do think about this is what are the best hits you could possibly have. And this year I'm thinking like Jaron Duran. I'm thinking Garrett Crochet. Uh,
hmm.
I feel like there's another one that I'm missing. Maybe.
Yeah, there's certainly some candidates out there. Yeah, I'm trying to brainstorm as well, but yes,
Mm-hmm.
with that White Sox roster,
Jerickson Profar.
for sure, with that White Sox roster, it was tough to pick someone who would succeed, and yeah, that's why my number 2 flop is coming from that roster. It is Dominic Fletcher. If you haven't heard of him,
I don't blame you.
you're probably not alone. He only played 28 Major League Baseball games heading into the year. He was acquired from Arizona this past offseason, and the only thing I really had on him was he was an above average hitter in the 28 MLB games that he played. And he had some underlying things to say that maybe he could keep that up, but he didn't. And in fact, he put up a 47 OPS plus in 241 plate appearances. He was 53% below average as a hitter in 241 plate appearances. And out of 365 hitters with 200 plus plate appearances, Dominic Fletcher's OPS was 5th lowest. And that's out of 365. That is not a small sample size whatsoever. So yeah, unfortunate pick out of the South side there, but you know, it was going to be tough this year. I did not forecast Garrett Crochet being one of the best strikeout pitchers among all starters this year, but should have looked more into that. Who is your number 2?
My number 2 pick, my second Colorado Rocky on this list. I picked 2 Rockies. Hunter Goodman was not the worst one. Justin Lawrence was the worst one. He was a reliever that I was hinting at as someone that could maybe garner some trade interest, having coming off a good year in 2023. But in 2024, he put up a 6.49 ERA in 59 and 2/3 innings pitched, the second highest ERA among the 169 qualified relievers. Lawrence is a sinker baller, and his sinker does what it can. It got a 56.9% ground ball rate, but on non-ground balls against his sinker, opponents hit 579 and slugged 1158. So it was either a ground ball or just about the worst pitch you've ever seen in your life. So it was a tough one for Justin Lawrence, and yeah, he is my number two flop of the year.
Right. Yeah.
My
You
yeah, I picked two Rockies and just about could not have missed any more on them.
Um, so yeah, that leads to my number one flop of 2024, and it is Mitch Garver of the Seattle Mariners. And yeah,
Yeah,
lesson to be learned: if I'm going with a Mariner, I cannot select a new hitter, a guy who's just been acquired and is going to start hitting with the Mariners because it seems like it's a 0% success rate
yeah.
on any of them.
I mean, shout out to Dominic Canzone as well. Not my number one flop, but definitely a flop of mine.
Yeah, well, yeah, and Mitch Garver, by the way, was one of the more higher profile guys that I picked. I mean, he had a 138 OPS plus with the World Series champion Rangers in 2023. But yeah, disappointed this year. His OPS plus dropped by 53 points from 2023 to 2024. And also his strikeout rate increased by 7.1 percentage points. So yeah, I mean, not only just a flop of a player being bad, but it's like, what was I thinking? Picking a Mariner who's just acquired to succeed offensively. Like, yeah, if next time I got to go with a new reliever, a new starter, but I can't be going with any hitters that are coming from somewhere else. I can't be doing that anymore. Who is your number one flop?
My number one flop. I was really beating this guy's drum this season, and well, it certainly didn't work out. I'm talking about Christian Encarnacion Strand
Hmm.
from the Cincinnati Reds. I said, hey, don't be surprised if he hits 35 home runs this year. That is what I said about Christian Encarnacion Strand. Well, he didn't even play 35 games, let alone hit 35 home runs. He split he slashed 190, 220, 293 for a 513 OPS in 29 games before he got hit on the wrist by a pitch in late April and then underwent season ending surgery. Um, yeah, I mean, a disastrous pick. You can point to the bad metrics and then the injury and say, oh, well, maybe it was the injury, but it was a hit by pitch that caused him to get injured. So, not really a valid excuse. Not to mention, his batted ball metrics went down pretty bad. His ground ball rate went from 34.6% to 48.2%. His fly ball rate went from 31.4% to 22.9%. And his line drive rate went from 24.8% to 16.9%. And this is all in a small sample size. It's true. But regardless, I mean, for a guy that I said would hit 35 home runs, he hit two.
Yep.
So, that's not very good. I mean, I was so high on Christian Encarnacion Strand, I accidentally convinced someone in our F4 league to draft him, even though that was not my intention.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's on you, Rob.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I can't. I just said, hey, he could hit 35 home runs. That doesn't mean he'll play good defense or have necessarily good rate stats or run the bases well and thus produce a good F4. I just think he could produce some interesting counting numbers playing a full year in Cincy. And
Yeah,
someone took that to me, and I will put money on it.
yeah. Shout out to non-injury replacements. We implemented that into the league
Well,
this year.
yeah, yeah, because he did use the non-injury replacement right before he got hurt.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Which could be, depending on your season outlook, could be a good thing, could be a bad thing.
Mm,
But yeah, yeah, those that does it for the 2024 hits and flops. Just always fun to reflect.
yeah.
One of our biggest moments of reflection that we do annually,
Hmm.
every year. But yeah, so do we want to get into our custom awards next?
I would love to. I have three this year, which I think is normally how many I have, but I change mine up every year. You have a three staples.
Yes, yes.
I have one staple and then two that I kind of just.
Right, yeah. Yeah, you switch them up, but I'm always pleasantly surprised to see what you come up with.
Mhm.
And yeah, my three staples have been around since 2021. This is going to be the fourth time doing these awards. And two of them are, well, all of them are things I'm pretty passionate about. It's, guys who throw soft fastballs and And then it's the luck spectrum. I love to talk about luck in baseball because I don't think it gets talked about enough, to be honest. But yeah, did you want to lead off with your first award?
I would love to. This award, I think, very much goes in line with something that we've touched on a lot this year in regards to sabermetrics and luck factors. I am calling this the Maximist Award, a guy who outperformed his expectations, whether it be preseason based on vibes or statistically based on what things like expected batting average and expected slugging say, and outperformed them exclusively because of their batted ball profile. And the winner of the Maximist Award is Tyler Fitzgerald of the San Francisco Giants. He put together a really nice year for himself at age 27 as a rookie, hitting or slashing 280, 334, 497 for an 831 OPS. And the reason he did this, he had a 14.5% pulled fly ball rate, the seventh highest among the 403 hitters with at least 100 batted balls. 43.5% of his fly balls were pulled, the sixth highest rate among the 285 hitters with at least 50 fly balls. And when you look at the expected numbers, he outperformed his expected slugging by 110 points. He outperformed his expected batting average by 48 points. So Tyler Fitzgerald, like I said, outperformed the expected numbers because of his batted ball distribution. He also had a 100th percentile sprint speed. He also had a 90th percentile sweet spot rate. And just generally defied expectations as a whole, right? I mean, I don't think many people had Tyler Fitzgerald making an impact for the Giants before this year, but that's exactly what he did. And he is winning the Maximist Award.
Yes, congratulations to Tyler Fitzgerald. And yeah, that's an important thing to bring up because yeah, people will look at people like me just a couple years ago would have looked at his actual numbers versus expected numbers and been like, oh, he got lucky this year. But it just that difference exposes really the main and kind of only flaw with expected stats is it doesn't account for batted ball direction, particularly on fly balls where things like that can get skewed because yeah, if you hit some really hard fly balls, but they all go to the deepest part of the park, you're not going to get great results on it. But if you hit some average fly balls, but they go right down the left field line, you're going to get better results on it than what the expected numbers say because yeah, a 100 mile per hour, 30 degree fly ball has the same expected numbers no matter where it's hit in the park, even though they get much different results depending on where they go in the park. So yeah, that's why that award is important. My first award is the Snowballer of the Year. This is the opposite of a fireballer. This is, the pitcher who does the best with the least velocities, particularly fastball velocity, and uses their fastballs a decent amount. And for the first time ever, this is going to go to a reliever. He got a really good workload though.
Whoa.
94 and a third innings pitched. So he was, he got some extended time out there. So that's why I'm willing to give this award out there. It could be considered, an Eric Gagne, Dennis Eckersley situation, given recognition of the guy that didn't get as much workload. But, I have my reasons to justify it. But yeah, mine and previous winners, by the way, before I announce the 2024 winner, in 2021, this went to Adam Wainwright. In 2022, it went to Nestor Cortez. And in 2023, it went to Marcus Stroman. But in 2024, it is going to Tyler Holton, who had an exceptional year out of the Tigers bullpen and did it with the 17th percentile in fastball velocity, and had a 2.19 ERA and 2.75 expected ERA in 94 and a third innings pitched. And out of 140 pitchers with 90 plus innings pitched, his ERA ranked third and his expected ERA ranked seventh. And some numbers I actually forgot to put down just how often he used fastballs because he definitely used them a good bit. So I'm trying to get the exact rate that he got. But before we get there, I will say he was one of 72 pitchers to throw 500 plus fastballs at 92 miles per hour or slower. And out of those 72, Holton had the lowest batting average, slugging, expected slugging, WOBA, and expected WOBA on such fastballs. So on the fastballs that were 92 miles per hour or below, Tyler Holton was getting the best results on them. And that is why he's winning Snowballer of the Year. And yeah, overall, yeah, he used his cutter 27.3% of the time. That's a fastball. Sinker 21.6% of the time. That's a fastball. Also used his four-seamer 15.2% of the time. So cumulatively, he used fastballs almost 70% of the time, if my math is correct, or definitely over 60% of the time, despite having low velocity on all those pitches. So yeah, shout out to Tyler Holton. Usually there's someone who is close with them. So I'll mention my honorable mention. Ranger Suarez was the runner-up in this situation. He definitely had a lot more workload, but Tyler Holton's results, at bat per at bat with these soft fastballs, were just too good for me to ignore. So congratulations, Tyler Holton, the 2024 Snowballer of the Year. What is your second award?
My second award is something that I've referenced before, the ground god. Of course, this is a player that excels particularly in regards to ground balls. Now, Chris, when we talk about ground gods on the show, we're usually talking about pitchers with high ground ball rates, right? Framber Valdez, Andre Palante, Logan Webb. Well, I'm actually giving this to a position player today because there is a position player that excelled on ground balls in a way that we have never seen in our fandoms in baseball. I'm talking about Bobby Witt Jr., who did a lot of great things this year, but most notably hit 396 on ground balls. That is, if that sounds high, it's because it is very high. In fact, that is the highest average anyone has had in a season with at least 200 ground balls since at least 2008. And there are 919 such seasons with 200 plus ground balls since 2008. Bobby Witt Jr.'s 396 batting average in 2024 is the highest. The second highest in that span is 368. That means the gap between first and second is the same as the gap between second and 19th place. So Bobby Witt Jr. was excellent when hitting the ball on the ground this year, almost hit 400. And it makes sense when you consider that he hits the ball very hard. He's incredibly fast. We live in a post-shift world. Not that I think Bobby Witt Jr. would have been shifted quite a lot when there was a shift. But, I mean, a 396 batting average on ground balls throughout an entire season is something that I think is absolutely worth mentioning in the same sentence as ground god. So, Bobby Witt Jr., congratulations.
Yeah, an unbelievable development in the world of ARR as we are acknowledging hitting the ball on the ground and success through that, because normally it's the pitchers we're spotlighting, but got to shout out Bobby Witt Jr. And that is, I guess, the other main flaw with expected stats is it doesn't consider a player's sprint speed. So, someone like Bobby Witt Jr., he can hit a bunch of ground balls and it's fine because he runs through first base in like 1.5 seconds. So he'll be all right. But my second award is the Powerballer of the Year. And that's not a reference to how fast anyone's throwing a ball. It's the Powerball as in the lottery. It's how lucky are you getting? Who had the most luck this year? And previous winners have been, I forgot to write it down, but I believe Marcus Stroman in 2021. There were a couple others, but there have been some winners in the past. Marcus Stroman was the one in 2021. In 2024, it is Reynaldo Lopez of the Atlanta Braves, who really stood out this year, at least on the surface, and was a major surprise in the Braves rotation. He put up a 1.99 ERA in 135 and 2/3 innings pitched, but had a 3.88 expected ERA. His expected ERA was nearly double his actual ERA. And out of 107 pitchers with 350 plus batted balls in 2024, Lopez had the luckiest difference between ERA and expected ERA. Part of this had to do with some luck that he had when it really mattered most with runners in scoring position, particularly. He had a 125 BABIP against with runners in scoring position. And out of 113 pitchers with 400 plus pitches thrown with runners in scoring position, he had the lowest BABIP against as well as the luckiest differences in batting average and expected batting average, slugging and expected slugging, and WOBA and expected WOBA, particularly with runners in scoring position. So he was the luckiest when those situations where runners, he was luckiest in the most run-prone environments, to put it in layman's terms. Part of this had to do with an 0.30 average against on ground balls with runners in scoring position, which was the lowest average against out of 198 pitchers with 25 plus ground balls against with runners in scoring position. And that was despite having the 99th softest contact on ground balls. And yes, of course, most ground balls should be outs, but the league average on ground balls is around 240. He had an 0.30 average against on ground balls with runners in scoring position this year. So obviously there was a good amount of luck on his side, which allowed him to have a sub 2 ERA this year. But because of those reasons, Reynaldo Lopez is getting the 2024 Powerballer of the Year.
I'm one thing that I'm a storyline that I'm following next year that I probably should have been following before this year is to see Marcus Stroman go for the sweep of Chris Awards throughout the years.
Yeah, he needs to get really
He needs
unlucky
to have a
one year.
really, really tough year.
Yeah. Indeed. Because yeah, he has won Snowballer of the Year as well as Powerballer
Powerballer.
of the Year, as I've mentioned. Yeah, I unfortunately I can't go back and get the past ones unless I actually listen to the episodes because
Yeah, you could do that.
the prep sheets are all on
Yeah, we lost all the old prep sheets.
yeah,
Very
RIP.
unfortunate.
Shout out to Springfield College, shutting that all down. But but yeah, what is your third award?
Well, you know my third award is.
Oh yes.
It is my favorite award. It is the Mercy Award, which needs no introduction. I'll just get right into it. The winner of the Mercy Award for the third iteration is Tanner Houck of the Boston Red Sox. He had a solid season, but one hidden part of his success was just freezing guys where they wanted the most. 38.9% of the 185 pitches that Tanner Houck threw right down the middle were not swung at. That is the highest rate among the 697 seasons since 2017, with at least 150 pitches thrown right down the middle.
Wow.
Tanner Houck, again, almost 40% of pitches he threw right down the middle swung at. And it was a historic season given the sample size. We haven't seen it since 2017. So, a very impressive season for Tanner Houck, throwing it right down the middle. I mean, who knew that that's all he was missing all those years? Andrew Bailey came in there and said, "Hey, man, this is what you're going to do. You're going to throw it right where they want it, and they're going to have no idea what hit them." And that happened, and it worked. So, shout out to Tanner Houck, the Mercy Award winner. Very happy for him. And this is a big development for us as Red Sox fans.
Yeah, for sure. And I know a lot of the time, definitely with this award, it's somewhat by chance. However, I think there is some sort of merit
Yep.
to it
I was thinking about that same thing. Like maybe that means something
because
because it's probably pitches that moved into the middle.
yeah, like with that sinker slider combination that he has, I think it's really hard for some of those hitters to pick up if it's going to be an absolute meatball. So I think there is some merit to that because of how much his pitches move. It just doesn't seem like it's going to land there. So yeah, people don't swing at it. But yeah, I think that is funny. And yeah, shout out to Tanner Houck. Yeah, probably my favorite award of the custom awards. I think you introduced it 2 years ago, I believe.
2022, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, Griffin Jacks got that one,
Mm-hmm.
I
I
believe.
forget who won it last year,
Me as well. We'll have to go
but
back to
I
that.
do know Griffin Jacks won it in 2022. I can't. Every time I see him, like that's immediately what comes to mind. I don't know about you.
Well, I just remember like after the recording of that episode, we just went to Baseball Savant and watched, like half the pitches that
And they were forcing fastballs too.
yeah. It's just like, wow, look at this. Why are they not swinging? Something about watching like 15 straight fastballs down the middle being taken just really eats at you. It's really something
Mm,
that you're not
yeah.
that your body's just not designed to do. Um,
Mhm. Well, I
but
mean, if it's any, if Tanner Houck feels a little concerned about winning this award, I mean, Griffin Jax looks just fine 2 years later.
indeed, it
He had a
seems
very
to,
nice year for himself.
yeah, one of the better relievers in baseball, sub 2 FIP.
Yep.
Um, now on to the short end award, which is the opposite of the Powerballer of the year, is the player with the worst luck. And yeah, these awards do skew towards pitchers because I think pitchers just have there's they're much less in control of their luck, if that makes sense. Just with a hitter, you can kind of have your own identity as a hitter and maybe sneak some hits by where most hitters don't, or get hits in your own way, whereas hitters don't, or pitchers don't really have that ability. So pitchers just tend to um be more luck prone, or have their results be more weighed by the luck of their ways. So this is again going to a pitcher, and this is Jordan Montgomery, who definitely had a bad year and definitely should have had a worse year than he did before, but maybe not to the extent that he ended up having. Jordan Montgomery had a 6.23 ERA this past season with a 5.10 expected ERA and 4.48 FIP, and that was in 117 innings pitched. Out of 126 pitchers with 100 plus innings pitched, he had the highest BABIP against in baseball. Also, out of 107 pitchers with 350 plus batted balls against, he had the second unluckiest difference in batting average and expected batting average, slugging and expected slugging, and ERA and expected ERA. And I would say that some of the people, or the people ahead of him in those cases, they maybe had those discrepancies because they allowed a disproportionate amount of pulled fly balls and more home runs, which doesn't count against expected stats the same way maybe they should. Where Jordan Montgomery was having some bad luck was on ground balls. He had a 300 average against on ground balls, and out of 101 pitchers with 150 plus ground balls allowed in 2024, he had the fifth highest average against on grounders and fourth unluckiest difference in batting average and expected batting average on ground balls. So yeah, Jordan Montgomery getting the 2024 short end award. And yeah, I know he
Well, I
joins.
mean, Ken Kendrick says huge reason why they missed the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, how much of it was his fault? There's
Some of it.
some of it for sure. He definitely had a worse year peripherally, but maybe not that much worse under the surface. But yeah, he joins Eduardo Rodriguez and Hunter Green as winners. I forget who won. I do forget who
Eduardo
won in
Rodriguez was an
2022.
all-timer in 2021.
Eduardo Rodriguez is the reason I made the award, I will say.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and partially just because it was so frustrating seeing
The
the
discourse.
non-educated folks say, "Oh, he's doing bad. I don't want to re-sign him." And he, he
Yeah,
ended up kind of being fine. All right. So yeah, those are the custom awards. Lovely as always to discuss those. And I guess yeah, now we'll get into the BBWAA awards.
yeah,
Some fun races to talk about. I don't think any, not too much that's really tightly contested, I would say. Manager of the year is always very subjective, but other than that,
yeah,
uh there, that's what's going on. The finalists haven't been announced, so we could be selecting some players who aren't even
yeah.
players or
It's
managers
gonna
that
be
aren't
crazy when Aaron Judge isn't a finalist tomorrow.
even.
And we're like, wait, what?
What?
Hold on a second.
But yeah, I guess we can start chronologically, and do the rookies of the year and start in the American League. I think some contenders are going to be obviously Colton Cowser, Wilyer Abreu is going to be in there. I think Mason
Luis
Miller,
Heel, Austin Wells, Mason Miller.
uh, maybe Cade Smith. I mean, that guy had a sub 2 ERA as a reliever. But yeah, who do you think? Yeah, we could do some picks and
Are we picking who we think is going to win it or who we would vote for?
I think both. Like,
Okay. I mean, there's
Yeah.
one where I went off the beaten path of who I think is going to win, but it's a manager of the year, so who cares?
Okay.
The AL Rookie of the Year race is so bleh this year compared
Oh
to the
yeah.
NL. Like there's at least four guys in the NL that I would give the AL Rookie of the Year to if they were in it. Um, but someone's got to win it this year, and for me, that is Colton Cowser. He would be the third consecutive Oriole to finish top two, the second consecutive Oriole to win it. Um, and um, he had a very solid year. Obviously, not a perfect one. He did strike out 30% of the time, but he slashed 242, 321, 447, a 120 weighted runs created plus in 561 plate appearances as a rookie. He had very good defense. He had very good base running. And in a rather sparse crowd of rookies, he was kind of just the one that stood out the most. There's not really much else to say, so I'm going Colton Cowser as my AL Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, my pick is Colton Cowser as well. I also think he will win it this year. And yeah, he had the most wins above replacement of any AL rookie. Had the full year, and I think 120 OPS plus or weighted runs created plus, I forget which. Excellent left fielder defensively. And yeah, just did better than all the rookies. I will say I was on the brink of having Mason Miller as my personal selection,
Mm-hmm.
but I I was going to do that basically entirely off the peripherals, having a 1.76 ERA or expected ERA, excuse me. Um, and being 100th percentile strikeout rate, 100th percentile whiff rate, 100th percentile expected ERA, but I kind of went deeper into the numbers, and part of the reason why he had a large difference in ERA and expected ERA was he did perform worse with runners in scoring position, like had a lower strikeout rate, had, worse quality contact against him. So that's why he, allowed a disproportionate amount of runs compared to his peripherals. So I did consider that. And I don't think that's something that the writers are necessarily going to look into, but it's something I looked into just for my personal pick. So yeah, I'm just going with the basic route and going with Colton Cowser because I think Mason Miller's 2.49 ERA is actually indicative of what he should have done
Mm.
or how he should have performed. And doing that as a reliever is not necessarily as worthy as, say, if he were to have a sub 2 ERA like his peripherals would indicate. But yeah, so yeah. And all that to say, I got Colton Cowser, and I think he will win the I think he will win the award. Now on to National League Rookie of the Year. Who do you got?
With all due respect to Jackson Merrill, he had a very good year. If you showed me his line at the beginning of the year and said this is a Rookie of the Year, and I'd say okay, but Paul Skeens is the correct pick. He is my pick. The only thing that is holding Paul Skeens back in this Rookie of the Year race with Jackson Merrill is the fact that he entered this season with 6.2 professional innings pitched. Uh, the only reason he's being held back is because Jackson Merrill was on the team on opening day, and Paul Skeens was in AAA for a few starts. Just because, like I mentioned, he had pitched 6.2 professional innings before this year. Despite that, he came up in mid-May, had a 196 ERA throughout the season, the lowest ERA in Major League Baseball among all qualifiers from the time that he made his first start to the end of the season. He was third. He was tied for second highest in FWAR in that span. He became appointment television every single time he pitched. He took 3 losses all year, and the Pirates scored 2 runs in each of those 3 losses, or 2 runs or less. Nobody lit him up. Like the worst outings he had were still not bad. Uh, Obviously, he lit up the radar gun. If you look at the Savant page, it's virtually all red except for extension, which is not a requirement to be good. Paul Skeens is the NL Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, it's a race between Jackson Merrill and Paul Skeens, as he mentioned, and I kind of wanted to make the case for Merrill, and I think sometimes it can be understated by the people who really like Paul Skeens, and in some ways it can be really close, and in other ways it can not be very close. I think if we're discussing who is the most valuable, you know, who's the most valuable to their team or just most valuable in general, I think it's a different discussion, and I think it's a lot closer. And I think there may be an argument for an advantage with Jackson Merrill, but rookie of the year, it's just kind of like who is the best player, and I think Paul Skeens performed the best, and that's why I'm going with Paul Skeens as my selection, and I believe he will also get the vote from the BBWAA in a strong race. I think he'll probably get probably somewhere between like 22 and between 22 and 30 first place votes. I don't know if he'll get unanimous, but I'm sure someone will throw out a Merrill first place vote. But I think Skeens is going to get the nod ultimately. To go over what he did this year, he led all MLB rookies in ERA, FIP, and expected ERA, minimum innings, 80 innings pitched, and he threw over 130 innings, I believe. He also led all rookie pitchers in FWAR and led all major league rookies in any position in BWAR. And then also, he had some slight ERA and FIP differences, which is naturally going to happen when you have a 1.96 ERA. And those differences can kind of be explained by better performance with runners in scoring position. He had a higher ground ball rate, higher pop-up rate, lower average exit velocity, and lower expected numbers with runners in scoring position. So that's part of the reason why he had better actual numbers than expected numbers, because or better ERA, a better ERA than his peripherals indicated, because just he did better in the more crucial situations, which can't really be accounted for by FIP or expected ERA. And then along with that, if you want to do kind of, it's with rookie of the year, sometimes it can be hard because it can be really hard to compare pitchers and position players because the numbers are so different. On Baseball Savant, they have run value, which helps out in this debate a little bit. Paul Skeens combined for a run value of 31 on Baseball Savant, and Jackson Merrill combined for a 28 through his batting, fielding, and base running. So, obviously with Skeens versus Merrill, it's not a debate of Skeens' pitching versus Merrill's hitting. Merrill brought a lot to the table with his, not only his hitting, but his base running and his fielding. But still overall on Baseball Savant, Paul Skeens' pitching outdoes Jackson Merrill's combination of assets. So ultimately for me, it's Paul Skeens because I think he was just the better player this year and arguably also more valuable. That is NL Rookie of the Year. On to American League Manager of the Year. Who do you got?
Yeah, I mean, Manager of the Year is obviously the big one. That's the one that we're most excited for, as we are every year.
Yeah.
This is where I'm going off the beaten path and choosing someone that I don't think will be chosen by the BBWAA. I'll start by saying I think they're going to give it to Stephen Vogt. I don't think that's a bad decision, assuming that's the route they decide to go to. He's obviously a first-year manager. He took a team that finished around 500 last year and made them actually under 500 and made them about 16 wins better. They won their division. They made it, well, not that this matters in the voting, but they made it to the ALCS. He got a lot of very good performances with a rather bleak pitching staff. But the person that I am choosing for this award is AJ Hinch. I think just everything that went down from August through the end of the season, the way that he had to bring that team across the finish line and get them into the playoffs on such an amazing record, I think means something to me, and I think warrants giving him Manager of the Year. August 11th through the end of the season, Detroit had 241 innings logged out of its bullpen. Not only was that the most in the league, they were the only team with over 200 innings out of the bullpen, and they had 241. And with all of that, first of all, it's already the end of the season where all your guys are already taxed, but to have them put in that kind of a workload and put out a 2.35 ERA, the second best in baseball in that time. There's obviously a lot of pitching decisions that need to be made. There's a lot of management that needs to be done in terms of figuring out who is pitching what day and how many innings and how many times to the order. Right, Detroit was basically operating with like a 1 to 2 man rotation for a while. It was Skubal for as long as he can, and then short outings from Mize, from Maeda, from Reese Olson, guys like that. And I don't know, to see the way that AJ Hinch got them to go on a legitimately incredible run, get them into the playoffs to end the year, and obviously get them to the playoffs just as a team that wasn't expected to go to the playoffs. And the way that they did it, I'm giving it to AJ Hinch this year. I don't think he'll get it. I don't think losing to Stephen Vogt is outrageous, but he has my vote for the way that things went for those last 2 months.
Right, right. And yeah, I think there's definitely a good case to be made there. I don't believe they're going to give it to Stephen Vogt. I think they're going to give it
Okay.
to Matt Quatraro of the
Another good
Kansas City
pick.
Royals, because I think
100 losses.
sometimes they just do the math and it's like, oh, how many wins did you improve by? And I think back to the 2018 National League Manager of the Year race, they gave it to Brian Snitker, even though I don't know, I just saw more managing going on with Craig Counsell with the Brewers than I did with Brian Snitker and the Braves, but they just were like, oh, they improved the most, so they're, give it to him. So yeah, I don't, I know it's 6 years later, so things might be different, but I think they're going to go with Matt Quatraro. But I believe
Another good pick.
I if I were given a vote, I would go with Stephen Vogt. I would vote for Vogt. And it's because of some of the philosophical changes he brought to Cleveland. And this is something that I guarantee almost no one who filled out a Manager of the Year ballot is looking at. But just to break down some stats that the Guardians had this year, they went from hitting at 23% fly balls to 27% this year. That's a change from 2023 to 2024, which is pre-Stephen Vogt and with Stephen Vogt. They also went from 5% of their batted balls being pulled fly balls to 8% of their batted balls being pulled fly balls. And the team went from pulling 23% of their fly balls to pulling 31% of their fly balls. Um, so yeah, and that resulted in better offensive numbers for the Cleveland Guardians. I believe their OPS plus went up by 7 points, which is a pretty big difference just as a team, as a whole team. When you're putting together, I think, thousands of plate appearances as a team, to go up by 7 points in OPS plus is a big difference. And I think a lot of that can be credited to some of the philosophical changes they seem to implement by not only hitting it in the air more, but hitting more pulled fly balls. And that offensive surge helped them win more games and help them win that division. And that's something I need to give credit for. And yeah, why I have him over Quatraro is I think the Royals had a much more productive offseason with player acquisitions than the Guardians did. There was a decent amount of excitement between the acquisitions of guys like Seth Lugo and Michael Walker, and some other guys in there, whereas Hunter Renfroe as well. Whereas the Guardians did really had zero offseason activity, and also the Royals actually did benefit from guys like Lugo and Walker. Whereas Guardians, it was all pretty much internal. The guys that they had this year, whoever they had this year was likely from last year, or guys that they brought in from the system. So yeah, Vogt had that as a disadvantage compared to the Royals. So yeah, that along with the changes that the Guardians had in their underlying offense, is why I'm going with Stephen Vogt. On to
Hmm.
National League Manager of the Year.
I do wonder if maybe there's like a recency bias that comes in for AJ Hinch because the vote is done at the
Hmm.
end of the regular season, and I think the Tigers were the most fresh on everyone's minds out of those three teams.
That does tend to happen because think back to 2 years ago, Terry Francona won it over Brandon Hyde.
Hmm.
And granted, the Guardians did make the playoffs and the Orioles didn't, but in terms of win improvement, the Orioles were much more impressive.
Yep.
It just the Guardians got really hot. They kind of came out of nowhere and took the division out of nowhere, whereas the Orioles kind of faded out, and that resulted in, how that manager of the year voting kind of went.
Yeah, so for National League Manager of the Year, I think this one's maybe a little more cut and dry. There are a couple of interesting options, but the person that I would give it to and the person that I think they would give it to is Pat Murphy from the Milwaukee Brewers. I know that there isn't a very good win improvement here. They won the division and made the playoffs 2 times in a row, improved by one game and one game only. Carlos Mendoza is also a good option. Dave Roberts, given the injuries that he dealt with, would be a good option. But Pat Murphy went into the season having lost Corbin Burns in a trade, having objectively a worse looking roster this year compared to last year. And there was a lot of uncertainty with how the Brewers looked, in the beginning of this season. There was a lot of uncertainty with the NL Central in general. And I mean, they took an overwhelming lead that they never looked back on, right? I mean, this team, did they go wire to wire? Like, were they ever not in first place at any point this season?
I think the Cubs started out hot, but once like May 15 or like once
Yeah.
June hit, I think it was
They
all
were
Brewers.
2 games back on April 8th, and that was the last time they weren't in first was April 10th,
Right.
and
Yeah.
they cruised to a division title. Yeah, they were up 10 games every day from August 16th until the end of the season. Outside of a couple of days that they were only up like 9 or 8.5. But yeah, it was an overwhelming division win for the Brew Crew. Um, in a year where really no one like ran away with their divisions, right? I mean, they won their division by the widest margin. Um, right? They won it by 10 games. Nobody else won the division by more than 6.5 games. So I mean, like for me, I really liked what the Brewers got out of Pat Murphy. They got some uh, better performances from a lot of their guys, whether it be Chorio breaking out this year, whether it be Joey Ortiz, Bryce Terang, who just won the Platinum Glove. They got the best season they've gotten out of Christian Yelich in a while. They got a good one out of Garrett Mitchell, who I believe was also a player to watch of yours. Um, so, I mean, I'm going with Pat Murphy here, and I think he's going to win it. But I also think there are a couple other good options.
Yeah, my my pick and my guy who I think is going to win is Carlos Mendoza of the New York Mets.
Mm,
Yeah, telling why it's I wrote down in my notes like it's like
it's
retelling
vibes.
the Todd Frazier Tom's River New Jersey story. Like
Yeah.
it's so cliche even now, even at this even with it happening so soon, you know, back in May, Jorge Lopez throws his glove into the crowd and calls the Mets the worst team in baseball, and the Mets are down and out, and then they finish their season 65 and 38 with the power of uh Grimace and the LGBT community, you know, all this.
Yep.
And also there could be
It
a
would
little
be
bit of
funny if it just Carlos Mendoza like got Grimace to throw out the first pitch. He orchestrated all of that.
yeah. Indeed, indeed.
He was only working with one All Star, Chris.
Yeah.
Only,
Right.
only, and only Pete Alonso. No
Yeah.
other All Stars on this team.
Yeah, the just a schlubby shortstop. Yeah, nothing. But yeah, in you know, does help that the Mets also improved their win total by 12, I believe, this year. I think they won 77 games last year. Um,
Hmm.
and then also there could be a little bit of in terms of why I think he will win, there could be a little bit of recency bias. I know that normally they vote on the Monday after the season ends, but I don't know if they would do that for manager of the year because obviously the regular season technically hadn't ended yet.
Yeah, I
Um,
wonder. I wonder if they waited till the end of the Mets Braves games to do that vote.
yeah, because I mean, if that's the case, then the case for Mendoza looks really, really good, especially with you know him just cracking into the playoffs. Um, and so yeah, and I think just like managing the team and managing all the chaos helped out. Obviously, the Mets I think are you know more talented than the Brewers, but I think there was just more that had to be done. Also, you know, first year manager like Murphy. And I think maybe this is biased from my perspective because my expectations for the Brewers this year was a little bit higher than yours. So and maybe a little bit higher than the general baseball consensus, which is why maybe I think the Mets performed more above expectations than the Brewers did. But yeah, I think just the comeback story is very enticing and yeah, I mean ultimately with manager of the year, it's really hard to analyze. So I'm just kind of going with the story with Carlos Mendoza.
Valid.
But yeah, that's all I got for managers of the year.
All right, moving on.
Moving on. We
Cy
put way
Youngs are
more time
very,
into that
very
than we
cut and
needed
dry.
to.
What's that?
We put more time into that than we needed to.
Yeah, we did. Um, Cy Young is very cut and dry.
I would say so. Yeah.
Yeah.
There are
Can we just go through both of them because I mean I think they'll both be unanimous.
um yeah, although I don't think NL is going to be unanimous. I will say that.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Um
It'll be overwhelmingly in one direction though.
I would agree. I would agree.
Yeah.
It might be surprising in the NL. I think there may be some Wheeler people out there in the NL, and I'm actually going to
I
talk
would
about
appreciate
why.
that.
I'm going to talk about why that might be the case,
Okay.
or why I have that as the case. But let's go over AL because I think that really is cut and dry.
That one will be unanimous. It's Tarek Skubal. He won the pitching triple crown this year. He went 18-4 with a 2.39 ERA and 10.769 strikeouts per nine in 192 thirds innings. Led the American League in FWAR by a one win margin over Cole Reagans. Yeah, this one, I mean, there's not much else to say. He was the best pitcher in baseball. He was dominant for much of the playoffs, not all of them. Uh, and down the stretch when they needed him the most, he was on his A game. There's really not much else to say. Tarek Skubal was a Cy Young in the AL.
Yeah, what I'll add to that, yeah, best ERA, ERA plus, FIP, and expected FIP among all American League qualifiers, and he also finished fifth in innings, so we had the workload to go with it. Also, most strikeouts in Major League Baseball with Tarek Skubal. And however, I wanted to acknowledge a very small sect of the baseball population because there's a little bit of a uprising, almost like I know it's political season, but a third party, like a a candidate that may get 2% of the vote. But there's some people out there chanting Emmanuel Classe's name,
Oh yeah.
who yeah, and I wanted to acknowledge this side because I think it is a silly argument, and I wanted to acknowledge why it's silly. And I'm not even in terms of what I'm talking about here. I'm not even going to get into the peripherals first because Clase, I will say, in order to get a 0.61 ERA like he did, you have to have some luck go your way, and that was the case with Emmanuel Clase. But I'm not even acknowledging that yet. So, talking about comparing the runs they allowed and the innings they threw. Tarek Skubal allowed 46 more earned runs in 117 and two-thirds innings pitched, and 46 earned runs in 117 and two-thirds innings pitched is a 3.52 ERA. That's the and so with Skubal, for the 46 more earned runs he allowed, you got 117 and two-thirds more innings pitched, which is, you get, over 100 more innings for a 3.52 ERA. I think most people would say that's a really, really solid trade-off. So by saying you would take Clase over Skubal, you are saying you would rather have 0 innings of production instead of 117 and two-thirds innings pitched of a 3.52 ERA, which is obviously really good. 3.52 ERA is very good to have over 117 innings pitched, and that's the gap that we're talking about. So that's kind of the math on that and why Skubal is clearly still the choice. If Skubal was a weaker candidate and had like a low 3 ERA, maybe there's more of an argument, but Skubal is clearly the better pitcher, clearly the more valuable pitcher. And then to go with the peripheral stuff, Emmanuel Clase had the lowest batting average on hard hit balls out of 380 pitchers with 50 plus hard hit balls allowed, and the third luckiest difference in batting average and expected batting average on hard hit balls. And he also had the second luckiest overall difference between WOBA and expected WOBA among 374 pitchers. So Skubal was fairly in line with his expected stats. Clase was not, and that's part of the reason why Clase is not even in my mind for this. But because of ERA, some people are into that. But that's my explanation as to why Skubal is clearly, Clase should not be even top 3. I don't think he should be a finalist in this discussion. But on to National League Cy Young.
Yeah, I got Chris Sale winning this one. Also a Triple Crown winner, 18-3 record, a 2.38 ERA, and 11.4 strikeouts per nine to less than 2 walks per nine and less than 0.4 per nine. Not only did he have the lowest ERA in the National League, but he had overwhelmingly the lowest FIP of any qualified starter at 2.09. Yeah, I mean, this one I think is also pretty easy for me. The innings obviously aren't quite there compared to some others like Zach Wheeler. It's only 177 and two-thirds, but I don't know. He was just too good on every other front for me to not give it to him. As much as we love to kind of hate on the batting Triple Crown, I think the pitching Triple Crown is maybe a bit more valid because I don't know. It's hard for me to see a guy that leads in strikeouts and ERA and say that's not the Cy Young winner. Wins I don't care about, obviously, but I mean, total strikeouts obviously mean there's a decent amount of innings. ERA is run prevention, and that's you don't really need to go too deep into peripherals with Cy Young unless it's 2021 Corbin Burns or early 2000s, late 90s Pedro Martinez. So, yeah, I think Chris Sale is the winner here, and yeah, I would love to hear what you have to say on this.
Yeah, I would say there's a debate to be had, and it's not for the reason why I think a lot of people are considering Wheeler. I think people are considering Wheeler just for the innings production. And talking about and to go a little bit into that, talking about that gap in earned runs and innings, I think it's 22, so it's 22 and a third more innings for Wheeler for a 4.03 ERA level of production. In terms of the extra earned runs he gave up for the extra innings. So that's kind of a neutral. I don't think it. I think it kind of goes either way. So they're probably just as valuable in that sense. And but what enticed me was they had a very similar expected ERA. Um, they had a 0.02 difference in expected ERA, while Wheeler, obviously had over 20 more innings. So that enticed me to potentially look at Wheeler. And, you know, obviously the with Chris Sale, he had a way lower FIP. So that kind of skews people to think, he was better peripherally. So I kind of looked into it. So so when we talk about FIP and expected ERA differences, they're usually explained by some combination of average exit velocity numbers, angle distribution, and fly ball distribution. And they actually had the exact same average exit velocity. Wheeler had a lower sweet spot rate distribution, and he had a lower pull to fly ball rate against. And also, Wheeler had two less expected home runs than actual home runs, while Sale had 3.6 more expected home runs than actual home runs. So Sale had maybe a little bit of luck on his side in terms of what ballparks he was in. He faces a lot of righties, and left field is very deep at Truist Park. So maybe had a little bit of luck going toward him on that. But why I ultimately pick Chris Sale is on Chris Sale's pulled fly balls against him, the ones that he did allow. He had a lower average exit velocity by 3 miles per hour and lower barrel rate by 20 percentage points than Zach Wheeler, which is why Chris Sale allowed much less home runs and ultimately had a much lower FIP than Zach Wheeler. And yeah, the differences between the FIP and expected ERA between Wheeler and Sale, I think, are largely explained by the quality of fly balls they were allowing. I think Wheeler overall had a higher barrel rate, which is why a lot of the batted balls left the park more. But also when he was allowing pulled fly balls, he was allowing some hard pulled fly balls, which allowed more balls to leave the park, which is why his ERA was a little bit higher and why his FIP was ultimately a bit higher and why his Fangraphs WAR was lower than Chris Sale's. So yeah, just a brief little over analysis of the Cy Young race, but ultimately I'm going with the popular pick and saying Chris Sale. But I think there's going to be maybe two or three Wheeler first place votes out there among the BBWAA because they like their innings, and let's not forget Zach Wheeler had as many first place votes as Corbin Burns in 2021. So that's something to. I think it's a fairly similar race as 3 years ago. Not exactly, but there's similar things going on.
This kind of goes into a point that I've wanted to make on this show for a while. Not that I have to explain this to someone like you, but I think something that I see that is just a misunderstanding all the time is talking about FIP and misunderstanding the way that it's interpreted versus the way that it's calculated. People talk about FIP as a predictive stat. It's a forecasting tool, and maybe the way that it's interpreted is forecasting, but it's not the way it's calculated. FIP is entirely based on things that actually happened, whereas stuff like expected ERA is based on hypothetical, right? Expected ERA is here's what the number would be if everything happened the way that we expect it does. Obviously, that's not what actually happens, but just for the purpose of understanding, with the things that he can control and whatnot, here is what would have happened if everything went as according to expectations. FIP, that's not it. FIP is literally based on things that actually happen on the field that aren't based on hypothetical, right? It's strikeouts, walks, home runs, innings pitched, environment. That's all very real things, and it's all things that pitchers can control. So I don't know, FIP is, yes, it is a forecasting tool. That's how it's interpreted, but that's not how it's calculated. And I think there's just a very big misconception about that that I just really wanted to bring up on the show. Not that I have to explain it to you, Chris. You understand what I'm talking about, but there's a lot of people that I think don't. But that is just a very important thing about FIP to understand when talking about it.
Yeah, I will add, maybe to contradict a little bit, but the thing that why I do look to expected ERA sometimes more than FIP is, with FIP, a double off the wall is seen the same as a weak ground ball. So,
Yeah, no, I mean, you're absolutely right in saying that. But like it just goes into a separate point regarding how people talk about FIP and I think what is a not very representative way of what the stat is meant to be.
yeah, I would agree that people do look at it as like kind of fairy tale land of like, oh, this is a thing that's kind of made up
Hmm.
to do this, but it's based on the core fundamentals of pitching: strikeout rate,
Yep.
walk rate, and home run rate. So, ultimately, and there's a reason why, you know 80% of pitchers with a high enough workload, it's very, very correlative with their ERA,
Hmm.
um, or maybe even more than 80%.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, if there's an outlier, you hear about it.
yes, yes, exactly. So yeah, now on to the MVP races, which were at certain points of the year much closer, but I think ended up being fairly consensus by the end of it.
Yep, I am talking about Aaron Judge as the American League MVP for the second time in his career. Um, I mean, would you believe in roughly the same number of in more plate appearances, he had a higher OPS than he did in his 62 home run year, an 1159 OPS in 704 plate appearances. Um, I mean, people had this discussion all year, and I think it is very real. I mean, he is the best clean hitter that just about anyone alive has ever seen. I mean, like if you're, now that we're talking about a 3 year peak of Aaron Judge, you kind of have to go back to like legitimately Rogers Hornsby for a clean player, a clean right-handed hitter that put up similar numbers in that kind of span. Yeah, he was awesome this year, 58 home runs. The walk rate is still also like a very underrated part of his game. He literally walks more than just about anybody, 100th percentile. Um, yeah, I mean the offense is still stellar. A 26.9% barrel rate is hilarious. Um, and 96.2 mile per hour average exit velocity is hilarious. There's really not much else to say. Aaron Judge is still that guy, and he is the MVP this year.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the comparison to 2022, because I think I got lost because he wasn't ultimately chasing a record at the end of the year.
Hmm.
This is the best season of his career.
Yeah,
It's better than 2022. He, not only on a rate basis, but
offensively, yeah,
yeah, and arguably as the whole package, he had more F4 this year than he did in 2022 as well. And yeah, not even just on a rate basis where, yeah, he had career highs on base percentage, slugging, and OPS, but he also had more total bases and got on base more times than he did 2 years ago. It's just, because he wasn't chasing a home run record, it probably doesn't get as much recognition, but it was a better year than 2 years ago, which is so crazy considering the standard that he set for himself in that year. But he ultimately outdid it, which is crazy. And Bobby Witt Jr. was that good to where it was a debate for a while.
yeah.
And yeah, unfortunately, as we get closer, there's probably going to be a lot of graphics comparing exclusively offense, and obviously Judge outdoes him in every offensive category outside of stolen bases. But yes, Witt is in this discussion because he was a Gold Glove shortstop, and Judge was a below average outfielder. So let's not forget that when it's talked
Mhm.
about, it's like, oh, Judge blew him out of the water. Yes, I agree that he definitely should win this and deserves this, but Bobby Witt Jr. made this a race because his offense was extremely good, top five in baseball probably, and also he was a Gold Glove defender. It just took Aaron Judge having one of the best seasons in baseball history to outdo Bobby Witt Jr. So, but yeah, in terms of why he's the MVP, Aaron Judge led all of baseball in on base percentage, slugging, OPS, OPS plus, weighted runs created plus, B WAR, and F WAR, and he also led the American League in win probability added. Anything more before we get into National League MVP?
Giving Aaron Judge a 367 BABIP should be illegal.
Yeah.
Like he should have like a peak that he like 350. You can't go above that. Like you're already too good.
Well, it's like, when you're average
No, I get it.
batted
Yeah, I get
ball,
how it got there when you're hitting absolute lasers,
because
like no matter where, whether they're in the park or out of the park.
he still probably had lower actual numbers than expected numbers
I think he did actually.
because of how
He his
deep.
bat well his bat okay his expected batting average. No, he lost 41 points of expected slugging.
Yeah. Yeah, because
Yeah, I mean Aaron Judge really like kind of had a tough year, tough luck.
yeah, very
Should have
unfortunate.
been
Guy can't
better,
catch a
really.
break.
Yeah.
Um,
What will anyone think of Aaron Judge?
yeah, pour one out. But yeah,
By
that's
the way, I
obviously
mean it's going
because
to be the most awkward MVP acceptance probably ever.
it's up there. Yeah.
Yeah. Like he's not like he can't even like have the novelty of winning it for the first time, you know?
Yeah.
Like it's going to be he's back for another time and he's going to be like, yeah, thanks guys. I would 110 million% trade this for the World Series, but I guess it's cool that I got another regular season award.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But yeah, who do you got for National League MVP?
Yeah, wow, what a question. I got Shohei Ohtani actually. He's have you heard of this guy? He not only does he hit, but he also runs the bases. I mean, it's like have you heard of Ken Williams? It's like that, but actually way better.
Yeah.
Everyone's talking about Shohei Ohtani and comparing him to that 1920s guy, Ken Williams.
Yeah, that's what comes to mind for me first.
Hmm.
I can't, I just can't go a day without hearing about the 1922 St. Louis Browns. You know, they
Yeah.
were calling Luis Ariz, the new George Sisler, back in back in 2023. So
Jokes that can only be understood on this podcast. Yeah.
um yeah.
Yeah, I'm building a team, Shohei Ohtani and Luis Ariz. We're calling them What If the St. Louis Browns Were Good?
Yeah, if you don't have any more analysis on Otani, I'll just break down the basics of
I mean, yeah, like
what he did.
I don't think I need anyone to explain. I don't think anyone needs to hear me explain why Shohei Ohtani has the MVP. If you have the numbers, go ahead and read them.
Yeah, he was the best hitter and the best base stealer in the National League. He had the highest on base percentage, slugging, OPS, OPS plus, weighted runs created plus, and weighted stolen bases in the National League, and also had the highest win probability added in all of baseball, more than Aaron Judge, more than Bobby Witt Jr. But yeah, and I mentioned best base stealer. He did not lead the National League in stolen bases, but he was more of an effective base stealer than Ali De La Cruz, who topped him by 4 stolen bases because Ohtani only got caught 4 times, I'm pretty sure,
Mhm.
or something like that, and Cruz got caught, like 14 or 15 times, which isn't bad. It's just like Ohtani, you trade off you trade off you're willing to sacrifice the 4 stolen bases to also take the 10 less caught stealings or whatever Ellie De La Cruz had. So Ohtani was the best base stealer in the National League to go along with being the best hitter in the National League. So everything else doesn't really matter,
Yeah.
so to say.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
led the league. I mean, led the league in F4 as a DH. No one's ever done that.
no one's ever done that.
Will likely be the first DH to win the MVP award.
Yeah, yeah, indeed, indeed. And very well earns it. But yeah, shout out to Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani. Just real, like, I mean, who would have thought these two
Yeah.
would be the MVPs of baseball?
Yeah, I mean, some real shockers.
Yeah, I mean, good for them finally getting the recognition.
Hmm. A
Um,
couple under the radar guys.
yeah, yeah, indeed, indeed. Like I was
Both of
debating,
them,
like,
both of them overcame the underdog stories to make it to the World Series,
yeah, yeah,
and they both absolutely shined in the World Series too. No one could stop talking about their performances. in the World Series.
Exactly. Yeah. Um,
And look at them now, MVPs.
MVPs
Yeah.
started from the bottom. Now we're here.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, that show. I think that does it. I think that does it. Anything more we wanted to add before the end of the show?
Well, yeah, I have a little surprise for the end of the show.
Oh, yes, I forgot. You mentioned this before.
All right, so to end the show, we're going to do something that has never been done on ARR before. It is the first time this is happening, although it really shouldn't be the first time, but better late than never, as they say. In March, when we do our players to watch, not only do we go over one player on each team that we are excited to see, we also ask each other a series of questions regarding each team that we answer, and we always say we're going to look back on them, but we never do. But I took the liberty to go through every question that we asked each other this year to evaluate how we did.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So to we ask a total of 60 questions. Each of us asks one for each team. I'm not going to go through every one because that'll just be very repetitive, but I'll just go over the results. Some of these were based on vibes. Some of these were based on statistics. Some of them you couldn't really base at all. But for me, you asked me 30 questions. I evaluated that I got 13 correct, 11 incorrect, and six that we had to kind of take out for various reasons. I called them the voids. We
Hmm.
voided a couple questions because guys got injured, guys didn't play, things like that. For example, Chris, one of the questions that I asked you this year was, will Ronald Acuna Jr. Get to 200 home runs and 200 stolen bases? Given that he tore his ACL in May of this year, I felt like it was unfair to give you a correct or incorrect on that.
Yeah.
So I got 13. I went 13, 11, and 6. Chris, you got 14 correct answers, so you beat me incorrect. You got 13 incorrect and three voids. So I went through all the questions. Like I said, I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'm going to throw together. I threw together some highlights, some of my personal favorites in terms of outcomes. So starting with the Pirates, I'm going in order of in how we did each division. We went NL Central, NL West, NL East, AL Central, AL West, AL East. So starting with the Pittsburgh Pirates, my question for you was, who will have more strikeouts, Marco Gonzalez plus Martin Perez or Paul Skeens?
And
Uh,
I think I went
do
with
you?
the veterans.
You did, and
And
Paul Skeens got 170 strikeouts. Uh, Gonzalez and Perez did not quite get there.
they even get to 100. Did they crack
No,
100?
no,
No.
they didn't even come close. I think Skeens might have been in
Wow.
by 100.
Wow. Yeah,
So
I was certainly not in enough on Paul Skeens
no, neither of
or
us were. And it's not even really because of Paul Skeens. I just don't think we really saw the Pirates bring him up that early in the season because of their history
yeah.
with service time manipulation. Marco Gonzalez started 7 games for the Pirates, I believe.
Oh wow.
Uh, yeah, he started 7 games, pitched in seven, had 23 strikeouts, which means that Perez would have had to have 147 to match Paul Skeens.
Yeah.
And he didn't quite get there. He got to 44. So they got to what, 23 plus 4. So they got to 77 strikeouts.
Nice. Almost
Yeah,
halfway.
77. So
Almost.
they were off by 93.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the math.
So tough incorrect there. For the Cubs, my question to you was, will Pete Crow Armstrong have over or under 13 and a half outs above average? And the reason this is a highlight was because his final number was 14.
Ooh,
So a perfectly set line. And Chris, you nailed the over.
let's go.
Yeah. By the skin of your teeth, you got it.
I was just the final five Cubs games. I was just watching what would
Intently.
happen in center field. I was like, am I gonna get this right?
Yeah, and you got it. So heck of a job there. Um, for the Diamondbacks, your question for me, and this ended up being a pretty big one because it was one that really needed to be correct because it would I would have looked like a fool if I got it incorrect. Who will have the better season between Ketel Marte and Christian Walker? Was your question. Ketel Marte had a fantastic season. Walker was fine by his own standards, but I mean, Ketel Marte had a 6-win season on Fangraphs, and I did come through with the correct answer. I said Ketel Marte. I feel like I would have lost a lot of credibility if I ended up putting Christian Walker there.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah.
So We did the right thing. This is
There we
my
go.
favorite. This is my favorite outcome in the whole thing. For the Miami Marlins, your question for me. Do you remember what your question was?
I know it had to do with Luis Arise.
Okay, so the question was in 2023, Jake Berger hit 34 home runs and Luis Ariz had 34 strikeouts. Will there be more Luis Ariz strikeouts or Jake Berger home runs? And wouldn't you believe it? They tied again.
No
Yeah,
way.
they tied
Oh,
again. Yeah,
that
Luis
rules.
Ariz and Jake Berger, 29 was the number for both of them on home runs and strikeouts.
Wow.
Yeah, so
That's
that one was obviously
fascinating.
voided.
Yeah,
Um,
indeed. Yeah, it's a tie.
yeah, I mean, what a like I had to like triple check to make sure I was seeing it right when I went through
Yeah,
it. But
that is insane.
right? Yeah, they
Yeah.
they tied again.
Wow.
Obviously a bit of a
Wow.
caveat. Of course, Arias did not spend the whole year on the Marlins, but who cares?
Yeah, right.
Who cares?
Exactly.
For the Phillies, my question for you, and this is not so much in the fact of what your answer was, but just the way that you evaluated it. Uh, I asked, would Trey Turner have over or under an 857 OPS? The reason I said that number was because that was the middle point between his OPS before and after the standing ovation in 2023. You took the under and said, no, he's going to be a high 700s to low 800s OPS guy. He ended up at 807.
Nice.
So, I mean,
Nice.
you couldn't have been more on the nose with that one.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
This is another good one. I ended up voiding this one, although you can throw a challenge flag if you feel like maybe it shouldn't have been voided. For the Chicago White Sox, your question to me was who is more likely to remind us of why they were a top prospect? Andrew Vaughn, Andrew Benintendi, or Yohan Moncada? Two out of those three ended up with a negative wins above replacements, and Yohan Moncada had a positive win above replacement, but only played in 12 games.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
So, but I mean, Andrew Vaughn and Benintendi did not quite remind us why they were top prospects.
Brutal.
Uh,
Brutal vibes in Southside.
yeah, even funnier. My question to you on the White Sox was which former prospect has a better chance of breaking out between Andrew Vaughn and Michael Kopech? Um, Kopech, I kind of gave it to. I mean, he was pretty good
Yeah.
on the Dodgers at least. You picked Vaughn, so I gave you an incorrect for that one.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's fair. I mean, Kopech at least had moments and Vaughn didn't
yeah,
really.
just not in Chicago.
Yeah, true, I guess. Yeah.
Um, for the Cleveland Guardians, my question to you was will Miles Straw have over or under 2.5 pulled fly balls? Um, Now, you might think that I avoided this one because he did not play for the Cleveland Guardians at any point in 2024. But guess what, Chris? We have minor league StatCast data.
Nice.
So I went through his AAA game logs. You picked the over, and he did it. He hit 8
Yes.
pulled fly balls in AAA, which
How
I
many
feel
did
like
he hit?
maybe 8.
What?
Yeah,
Wow.
which might be like the best evaluator for the gap in talent between AAA and Major League pitching.
True. True.
Like
True.
Miles Straw hit 8 pulled fly balls in
Yeah,
AAA.
that was
So
graded on the
I
that was
gave you I
graded on a
gave you a correct
curve.
yeah. So I gave you a correct answer for that one because why not? It was a meme
Appreciate it.
question. Might as well just give it to you since you got it. I probably would have avoided it if you said under, just to
Yeah,
just to be
no, that's
nice.
fair. I appreciate
Yeah.
it.
This is another one where I gave it to you because of your analysis. My question for you on the Detroit Tigers: which is more likely? One of Riley Green or Spencer Torkelson gets a 135 plus OPS plus, or Javier Baez has an OPS plus above 110. And you picked Green slash Torkelson specifically because of Riley Green. He ended up with a 133 OPS plus.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, you were pretty spot on. You know, he didn't quite get to the number I proposed, but I mean, he was very, very close. And I mean, if we're going to compare that to Javier Baez getting to 110,
Yeah, right.
I mean,
Exactly.
yeah, you were pretty good there. Going down to the Houston Astros, your question for me. was will Jeremy Pena have over or under a 99.5 OPS plus? And he finished with exactly 100.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
Unfortunately, I took the under, so I just narrowly missed on that one.
Tough.
Yeah,
Wow.
one walk or even just one more plate appearance could have made the difference.
Indeed. And I'm sure like that number could actually change in the off season because they do sometimes they switch up like they'll sometimes like a park factor will change or a league adjustment
Interesting.
will change. So yeah, a month from now that might not that might be
Hmm.
99 again.
Yeah,
Who knows?
and the last question that I highlighted um, was your question to me for the Red Sox. You said who will have the higher barrels per plate appearance, Rafael Devers or Tristan Casas? Devers ended at 13.0 and Casas ended at 13.3.
Whoa.
Yeah, I picked Casas. I gave it to me,
Yeah.
even though the sample sizes were a bit different. But um, yeah, he narrowly beat him out in barrel per plate appearance rate.
Yeah, that's a win. That's a win. No, yeah, I'm very happy you looked at those because we've been doing these questions. This is the fifth year we've done these
Yeah,
questions.
we finally actually decided to go back and check how we did. And yeah, I feel like I don't know. I feel like maybe the way to know that you ask good questions is that there was a very close gap between correct and incorrect.
Right, right. And I'm sure we did pretty well considering I'm sure not every question was had only two options. I'm
Hmm.
sure, most of them definitely did, but I'm
Well,
sure
I mean, I can go through some others. I mean, my Reds question for you was who will hit the most home runs. You said Ellie De La Cruz and got that right.
nice.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, so yeah, there were some open areas, but yeah, I think there were some, yeah, as you mentioned, there were some good lines that were set. Um,
Hmm.
that
The Marlins one was the best one by far.
yeah, that one, that's unbelievable. I'm
Like
gonna be
most
most proud
most
of
of the
that one.
voids were just like, oh, this guy pitched in 2 games this year. That's not fair. No, that one I actually had to void because we had a circumstance where like you legitimately couldn't make an incorrect or correct call.
Indeed, yeah, indeed. Yeah, no, that was a very fun topic. And yeah, like, it's funny to look at stuff 8 months, sometimes 9 months later, and look at
Hmm.
what were considered good questions back then. Because now some of them I'm sure look a lot different. So yeah, it's good to see how we viewed the league, and yeah, it makes me even more excited to ask these questions this upcoming winter.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, sick stuff. Yeah, another wonderful year of players to watch and team previews and stuff. And that definitely provides, the hits and flops always provide closure, but that adds a extra layer of closure on the year of predictions and players to watch and whatnot. But yeah, anything more before we wrap this up?
Um. No, I think that's it.
Awesome. Well, that does it for this installment of Above Replacement Radio. We hope you enjoyed this one. If you were listening to an Apple Podcast or Spotify and want to watch the conversation as it happens, go to the YouTube channel. It is called Above Replacement Radio. We have a bunch of features on there, some old shorts and whatnot, but we also have a playlist chock full of pretty good interviews, pretty good evergreen interviews. If you were into the 1920s baseball reference that we provided about the St. Louis Browns, you may enjoy Mark Simon, as he's been on the show 4 times, and I feel like we always sneak in at least one 1920s baseball reference in
Oh, for
there.
sure.
And we've also had Jeff Passan, Chris Rose, Sarah Langs, Mike Petriello, and Foolish Bailey um,
Mhm.
on the show in the past. So go make sure to check out those interviews on the YouTube channel. They're all in one playlist. And follow the show on Instagram at Above Replacement Radio. Follow me on Twitter at Chris_Gianta, and follow Daniel on both Twitter and Instagram at Daniel_Curran.
And
Um,
and go to Twitter at Chris_Gianta and say at Chris_Gianta happy birthday because it is in fact Chris's birthday as of 12:08 a.m. as we are recording this now on November 11th.
yes, if this episode gets out on November 11th, yeah, feel free to hop that along. Thank you, Daniel. Appreciate
Absolutely.
that. Yeah, you boys 24.
Wow.
Who would have believed it? Yeah, it is weird. I'm getting older and older than these MLB prospects, as we all are. But
At this point, if you were in like double A, you'd be a lost cause.
yeah, exactly. Like exactly. But yeah, that does it for this installment of Above Replacement Radio. We hope you enjoyed this one, and we hope to see you next time, where we're probably gonna be doing some free agent predictions. So
And stay tuned because we might have an interview next episode as well.
indeed, be on the lookout for that. We will see you then.
This conversation is over.